goes to Paris. Take one.
The Met's trip to Paris began on a high note, a note of elation and expectancy. 50 tons of scenery, 137 singers, dancers, musicians, carpenters, and orchestra conductors were flying to Europe. The timing was significant. The trip came after the Met's final performance at its old house and before the opening of its new home at Lincoln Center. The company hoped to improve its international reputation and possibly to launch an invasion that would bring it back to Europe in the years to come. This was the Met's second trip. It had gone to Paris in 1910 with Caruso and Toscanini. Toscanini was booed, press reaction was cold, and plans to tour Europe were dropped. Then the Met was 27 years old. Now it was 83, with a reputation as one of the world's great opera companies.
We arrived on a beautiful Sunday morning in Orly Airport in France. I saw all those people lined up, and I thought, they're surely waiting for us. Somebody joked and said, nah, the Beatles are coming in on the next plane. But actually it was for us, and it's very exciting.
The date, May the 29th. The voice, Judith Raskin, one of the stars of the Metropolitan, an American soprano from New York City in Paris to sing the leading role of Susanna in Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. In the next 2 days, there would be little sleep, 3 full rehearsals, and opening night.
The next thing I knew, a passport was in my hand and a baggage check in the other, and whirling around, and the kind of confusion that only can exist when a traveling company arrives in a new country. Then they said, find your bus. We found the bus all right. By that time, all the seats were gone. All the baggage was packed. We had to carry our luggage onto the bus, pile it on top of 16 other suitcases. Beautiful. But I tell you, sitting on the bus and looking at the buildings as we drove by, you're thrown into France so quickly when you're flying in. Suddenly, everything is French, everything is for real. You don't believe it's really here.
For some, the lack of sleep and confusion was too much. A room had been reserved for Judith Raskin, but another opera star found no reservation had been made for her. She bawled out the hotel management, cursed the Met's administrative staff, hit high C, then telephoned Rudolph Bing, the general manager, and started yelling at him. It had been a long flight, and nerves were as frayed as telephone wires. The next morning, the troupe got its first look at the Théâtre de France. Backstage, the Met's property master was moving into the cramped theater. The first rehearsal was for The Marriage of Figaro, with a cast including Cesare Siepi, John Reardon, Lucina Mara, Teresa Stratus, and Judith Raskin. They rehearsed in a cluttered room on the 4th floor, led by a distinguished conductor, a man with definite ideas about opera, Eric Leinsdorf.
E saggio, and you can make it a pause before. Who's why? Get your trouble. Yes, saggio.
Un signor liberale prudente. Un giovinastro, un paggio.
No, but the strengths of the paggio. Ladies, you can do a bit more than this. Io mi credea che preferir doveste per amante, come con tutti quanti. prudente, a un giovinastro. My concern in opera is, of course, not limited to quarters and eighths and pitches and tempi. An opera is a unity, or should be, of many aspects, and the singer who sings also a text, and by singing a text represents a personality, and there are dramatic situations, comedy situations, there are tensions between the characters, and this is like a play.
You can't do performances without rehearsals, but you can never know what is going to be by the rehearsal. You can only hope that the rehearsal has laid the most important groundwork, because in fact, the proof of the pudding is in the performing. And you wonder as you work, what part of this rehearsal is going to blossom and what part is going to fail us.
I was most delighted to encounter the new cherubino of the Metropolitan, Miss Stratas, who of course sings with a human warmth and understanding of the role, which I have not often in my career encountered. Most gratifying.
Upstairs, the rehearsal continued another 4 hours. Downstairs, the wardrobe was unpacked and the scenery set up. Mr. Edson, the Met is a much bigger house than this Théâtre National. How did you make the sets from the Met fit into this small house?
Well, the main problem in this stage is the width of the stage. What we've had to do with most of the drops is to cut them down, make the openings much smaller than we normally would play to.
How much smaller have you had to make them?
Well, in New York, we play to 67 foot is the full width of our drops. Here everything's had to be cut down to 46 or 48 feet maximum. The opening of the stage normally for us is 48 to 50 feet, and here we're playing to 36, so everything's been condensed. So
Have pieces of scenery been left out of the stage because it's so small?
Actually, very few. Barber, we're doing exactly the way we play it in New York. The Marriage of Figaro, we've eliminated a few of the smaller pieces in the rear and the third act, and that's about it. We have tried to give them as complete a Metropolitan production as we can, being a first time in Paris.
Dress rehearsals for an opera look much the same regardless of the people or the place. For some, the problem is passing the time until rehearsal starts. For others, it's a chance to make last-minute preparations. For everybody, it was a thrill to be in Paris. And since they are opera stars, they tend to sing while they work.
Do you think I can wear these shoes? They've got pointed toes, but they're much more comfortable. What are you wearing?
I'm wearing
Oh,
these.
so all right. So I'll wear
I
mine.
know.
Well, I have the white stockings because when I move, it's better. See.
When she says digli, he says saprò, se cherubino è raggiunto Siviglia. Then the girls keep on talking by themselves. That goes automatically. And the next entrance for the count, to anticipate, is when he says avanti sera, this should come in here. So if you mark this kindly and then throw them the cue, and I think that way the conversation is much more natural.
Fine, Master.
All right? Fine. Thanks a lot. Very good.
Cyril, that sky is good now, right?
Well, I think it should be lighter still. You know, it's a dead blue, isn't it? You know.
Rudolph Bing assigned Cyril Richard to direct The Marriage of Figaro and The Barber of Seville. Richard had been given a year to study both operas, to cut away the barnacles of unfunny stage business that had become traditionally fastened to these two comic productions, and to come up with a fresh and funny approach. Bing has made it a practice at the Met to reach out into the world of theater to find a new approach to opera.
Get everybody up a little further. And if the principals could play down a little bit, Siepi, s'il vous plaît. Don't be afraid to act a little further down, not on the wood here, but further, no, not that. Go back. John, feel the light in your eyes so that you get about there, but not right back, because you get in shadow. Yes, around there and further up too, but not right back. For instance, you, Jack, get where you can feel in your eyes that you're in the light, and you can all afford to come down a little more, and not the chorus. That's the limit there, except when you come forward to give him the flowers. And those are not the flowers that you used to have. They used to be blue. I thought they were the second act ones. Okay.
Since The Barber of Seville had been performed 2 days earlier in Detroit as part of the Met's 6-week American tour, there was only one rehearsal before opening night. When French director Jean-Louis Barrault invited Rudolph Bing to his 1,200-seat theater, The Barber of Seville, like The Marriage of Figaro, was chosen because it was a chamber-sized opera. Roberta Peters and Robert Merrill would sing the leading roles as they had many times before. The compelling reason why the Met opened with The Barber was because the cast was mostly American, and the conductor, handsome enough to be a movie star, an American from Kalamazoo, Michigan, Thomas Shippers. How is this orchestra pit compared to the one that you've been used to?
Well, of course, the pit at the Met, the old one and the new one, I mean, they're rather large. This is very, very small. Even to get 38 men in it was quite a squeeze. I wanted to play the harpsichord myself, but there wasn't any room, so I can't.
Will anything be left out of the Barber of Seville, which you're conducting, that one would see in New York?
No, nothing. Nothing.
The music is exactly the same.
Oh, yes. And it should be almost more, you know, it should be charming, more charming in a small theater.
Have they been changed and have they not been changed, these lights?
They've not been changed yet.
I don't know what can they be changed. They are.
Yes.
They are not Enora anymore.
Oh, they're much better. Like everybody's nerves are calming down. They're getting used to it. That kind of
Right.
They are calming down too much. You have to get on.
This is the Met's opening night in Paris. The Metropolitan Opera Company has been planning for this evening for 1 full year. Tonight's show is an American show. It's an American cast led by an American conductor. The opera, The Barber of Seville by Rossini, is taken from a play that first appeared here in 1780, written by Beaumarchais. This is the Théâtre de France at the Place de l'Odéon. The Met's run here will last for 1 week. Tickets were sold out in 48 hours. A number of Americans came over from New York for the opening, including several who donated the $140,000 to pay for the trip. That was not enough to bring the grand operas like Turandot and Aida, for which the Met is known. But it was enough to put on 2 small operas and enough for the company to prove a point. For years, the Met has felt overlooked. While American orchestras and ballet companies are sent abroad by the government, the Met has never received a penny from the State Department. This was a social, musical, and diplomatic event. It brought out French novelist Romain Gary and his wife Jean Seberg, Georges Pompidou, the Prime Minister of France, and American Ambassador Charles Bolin, as well as the Garde Républicain, who looked like toy soldiers with swords that rustle like crystal from a bygone era. The last celebrity to arrive, opera singer Maria Callas, looking like Minerva and invited by the Met. A Callas entrance has the same effect on a first-night crowd as Jacqueline Kennedy. Before she went to her seat, Madame Callas made sure that the performance had already begun. Whispers of the name Maria Callas spread through the house, and an audience very distracted from the performance watched as she made her way to the 8th row center. Roberta Peters, in her dressing room, preparing for her entrance as Rosina, which comes at the beginning of the 2nd act of The Barber of Seville.
I tried very hard before the performance with great expectation to put myself in the mood and do everything I could to be the part that I was playing. And I really feel that that's the way I started out, feeling very happy and very pleased to be in France and with great expectations that all would go well, considering that we had all these rehearsals over the tour, the past tour, and to be absolutely sure that we knew what we were doing.
No sooner was the first act underway than the champagne and caviar was rolling in for the opening night party to be given in the theater for 500 guests, a celebration planned to toast a memorable visit. Then the first intermission and a first impression by movie actress Jean Seberg. As an American who now lives in Paris, what sort of an opening night would you say this was compared to, let's say, a theatrical opening night?
I think it's very brilliant, what the French call brillant. It's all kinds of extremely well-known people in very diversified fields, and certainly much more elegant. I think people made an effort, and certainly much more shining than the average theater opening. I think you can call it a very big success.
Well, the critical reviews are not in yet, of course. What is your guess of what the French critics will say?
I don't know how they can say anything wrong from what I've seen. Of course, I have to see more too, but I don't see how they can say that it's not absolutely beautiful.
The trouble began in the 2nd act. Roberta Peters finished her big aria. There was a mixture of applause and some booing. Then, a powerful voice shouted out, "Bravo, Callas." It sent a shock through the house. What did you think during the 2nd act? Roberta Peters sang an aria, and after that, the audience, one man at least, responded quite unkindly.
Yes. I thought it was an extremely bad taste. I was very, very mad, and if I had had an opportunity, I would have told him so.
What did he do? Could you tell us that?
Well, obviously, he said very clearly something with Callas. I think he said, "Bravo, Callas." And I thought it was in very bad taste.
And Miss Callas is in the audience.
Yes, I know. And I think for her it must have been a very bad moment.
During this last act, there was a scene. You may have heard Roberta Peters sang an aria, and somebody got up and yelled,
"On préfère Callas," oui.
Yes. Oh, I think it was "Bravo, Callas."
Bravo, Callas.
Because Madame Callas, Miss Callas is in the audience tonight. What did you think about that?
Well, I thought that was very typically French, typical of a French audience, which is
sometimes doesn't respect the performer's ability, even if a performer has trouble. I think Miss Peters was having trouble with her voice tonight. I don't think she's singing as well as I've heard her.
Not only was the audience shaken, on stage, Roberta Peters and Robert Merrill were surprised, angered, and deeply hurt.
I didn't know what to do. I felt at a loss, but I recovered immediately, and I got mad. I got very mad. I imagine it's the Collis faction. I don't really know. I can't say. But whoever it is, it's foolish, because I'd like to see her get up on the stage and sing that performance.
I was terribly surprised about the booing. It's actually the first time I've ever heard it in a theater in my life. And it was quite unexpected. I think the entire company was surprised by it. The reason I think the booing occurred, the main reason I think, is that there's an anti-American feeling. There's no doubt in my mind that there is a certain amount of it.
The Paris press treated the Met as though they had been the Mets. One paper said every time Miss Peters sang, America risked a new Pearl Harbor. Every newspaper called the Met a disappointment. The feeling was summed up in the line, "The Met, is it only a myth?" The next night, The Marriage of Figaro opened. Some artists were severely booed, others warmly applauded, including Judith Raskin, who had strong feelings about the Met's reception.
My opinion of their manners is very low at this point. I think that they were... You see, I don't know what the French manners are. If this is what is considered the proper thing to do, then I suppose they did what they thought was proper. But in my opinion, this was not only rude, this was improper and not worthy of what was going on, because it was a beautiful performance. And if we have learned one thing by this experience, it's that, well, I think I have learned that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that sometimes people don't want to see what is beautiful because of other reasons. Perhaps the Metropolitan has learned something. There is a very great possibility that the booing had some truth. What that truth is, I am not in a position right now to evaluate, but it's very possible. There was a large majority of people who really responded beautifully. But I've never had the experience of hearing boos for great artists. I mean, it was really a shock.
Rudolph Bing, the general manager of the Metropolitan Opera, was sarcastic and depressed as he looked back on the Met's second invasion of Paris.
Well, first of all, this business of booing, I think all over the world, is becoming a sort of sport. Manners, hélas, deteriorate everywhere. There was a time when the world looked to Paris for the elegance of manners and for the gracious living and culture. I don't know whether they still look to Paris for the same. Also, we must realize that Paris, of course, is very much spoiled with the beautiful voices they have at their own wonderful opera. But let's keep these things in proportions. There was an audience of about 1,200 people, most of whom I think liked the performances very much, and there may have been 2 or 3 who booed, and 2 or 3 people who scream can upset a house. On the whole, we are delighted to be here. We have received the warmest welcome and the most wonderful hospitality from Jean-Louis Barrault and Madeleine Renaud and their whole staff in this lovely little old theater. And we feel, even if a few people didn't like it, even if indeed the press didn't like it, that this visit was well worthwhile, and we are happy that we've come, we're happy we've been asked, and we are happy to be here.
Were you surprised by the booing which occurred?
Mr. Probst, I've been manager of the Metropolitan Opera now for 16 years. Nothing surprises me anymore.